Hello, my name is Hope from the platform of eSeniors.org. eSeniors is a non-for-profit organization that provides virtual companion for seniors from age 60 and above. Virtual companion is basically designed to support seniors emotionally and provide companionship for seniors who feel lonely and isolated from their communities. And this is done remotely through the usage of video chat technology. So today, I want to especially welcome you all to today's book reading section. We have been reading a book from Alex Ageye titled The Unexpected Dawn, The Unexpected Joy at Dawn. We've done several chapters, so we're going to be starting off from where we stopped. Listen as I read. We don't have papers. You may help us if you have. Neil was ready. Neil was steady once more. That's nonsense. She's dying, and you talk about papers. One of the ladies spoke. If you doubt us, you may try taking her to hospital without having papers. If we get out here, we will be arrested. The hotel proprietor has warned us not to compromise his position. He has threatened to throw us out before the immigration gets wind of this. He's afraid. The fact is, he had informed the immigration that he had got us out of here already. We are all afraid. We don't know what to do. Perhaps you can help us. Neil crossed to the bed and lifted Masha up. I'm going to the hospital. You may wait for me here, he said. He carried this supine mascara and made for the door. Her body was cold. She had stopped breathing and her eyes were fixed. She was dead. He stopped at the door and shook his head. Tears began rolling from his eyes. Mash, Mash, he cried and returned her to the bed, fell beside her and snobbed. No one cried aloud. They feared attracting the attention of those in the hotel and the authorities. One of the ladies confided in them that Maska had taken some drugs to abort her pregnancy. Neil was incredulous and asked if she was certain of what she was saying. She hesitated. Yes, I think she was trying something like that. I didn't see her do it anyway, but it looks like that. How will you bury her? He asked. The ladies looked at him, surprised. We have no land here. Perhaps the hotel proprietor could do it. Now we are waiting for him. He told us yesterday to vacate the rooms today before the immigration arrived. There's nowhere we can go to. By this evening, we'll have made up our minds and we are afraid. We have to run away or be arrested and taken to the camp in Lagos. We don't want to end up in the camp. We watched a film on the camp on television yesterday night. It was horrible. Let's go, Aaron said. There's nothing to wait for here. Neil and his colleagues, after consulting briefly over the situation, advised the ladies to wait at the hotel until the following day. They would go for them and together they would travel to Lagos. On the way to Makaliki, they discussed the situation. Neil walked hurriedly away suddenly, leaving them behind. He cursed and cursed. He should have anticipated she would come to something nasty. He should have. He blamed himself. Maska might have committed suicide. With the kind of worries on her mind, it could not have been otherwise. He felt he was the only one who could have saved her. If only he had held himself together and buried his pride He hated himself. He worked so hard and so fast that his friends had to run to catch up with him. He did not he did not talk to any of them. Talio sat on a stool, a bag getting before him. He bent over the bag. The forest trees purred softly, and the screamed sound of the small insect suddenly intruded into the thoughts, which clouded his mind. But his colleagues would soon arrive, he assured himself. They surely would. He supposed the small hut was the wall, and it protected him. The thick forest trees stood by, no gun on the guards no gun on the guards would hit him without hitting any of the tall trees first. A plant that held one side of the hut had grown into a big tree and was tearing off the roof at one end, while the small twigs laced the bamboo roofing and prevented it from falling. He began to engage in the disturbing soliloquy. What was happening? How was he to survive if the others did not come? Supposing something happened to them, what would he do? Dagger had been a lucrative business, but the solitariness of the small old hut was pronounced in the wood. He sat there alone, and the darkness engulfed him completely. Possibly, when the other members of the Dagger arrived at the forest, they would bring information. He wondered why they had not arrived. Had the police or the guards arrested them on the way? That would explain their non-arrival. He felt a sense of danger and supposed that the day who had returned from Lagos and telephoned Joe's house and who was going to be Joe's wife might be the source of his sudden fears and the misfortunate that he suddenly felt might have befallen his comrades. He tried to calm himself if his account had not been frozen because of the central bank directives. He would have withdrawn some money and traveled. All the same, he felt an inner impulse of satisfaction, the joy of digging for gold and dealing in imitation produce on the side. He was this inheritance due to his being born into the street with no known relatives. He and Joe had been intimate. Joe was taking a wife. It marked a defining moment in Joe's life, and incidentally, he felt keening defined his loneliness more clearly. He hated the idea of Joe marrying like hell. Joe had plucked him from the streets to follow him to win gold and diamonds. Joe was a man of the poor. He was he he who had struggled as a declassified tailor shop apprentice and later became a dog chain pounder. Joe had a gentle eye for the poor class from which he had come. Joe, it was always Joe. He himself was surprised at having been able to evade the police for that long. Possibly, the police were biding their time, he thought, or he had many selves and hopes out of one into the other within a breath. A draft chameleon, perhaps, Or was he saved by pure luck? Sometimes his enthusiasm for life dropped so low and he felt so dejected. He smoked and smoked as a way of relief, but always the danger stood facing him and no lasting relief came. His life has never lacked activity. He had lived a full life, gone to the very depths of disaster, but had survived. But he had confessed to Joe what his life lacked genuine meaning and that he was finding it difficult to do what he needed to do to still his anxiety. Joe was always there for him. Since Joe was taking a wife and was believing him, he pictured in his mind a future without meaning, of timeless loneliness, fear, and no escape from boredom. The police might arrive after having arrested his colleagues. If his colleagues were arrested, they would lead the police to him. That might end his endless worry and speculation. He became afraid, so many funny ideas came up. But in the forest, he was part of the darkness. He was a still tree storm waiting on the soil. One day, certainly the end would arrive. It would meet him with his pickets, palms, and plastic water container and sack. He snore to himself. For the first time, he felt torn apart and lost and was intuitively inclined to fear. He was disturbed. He occupied himself with walking and surveying the forest. The land gave him fresh memories, its untouched virginity and innocence, the fresh lavender breeze, its breath putting forth unhindered and unfailing. He walked on. The river was nearby. The silence of the forest was getting lost now. As he walked to the river, he trod on the leaves and dead plants, breaking the silence with their cracking under his feet. He entered a marshy ground. The soil padded his feet, and the cold ate into him and his mind and might began to relax suddenly. The quicksand, referred to once a while by his group, had has remained a rumor, though, and they had never encountered it. He looked for the tree holes abandoned by the survey department and another that had not been visited since a white miner left it 120 years before. The truthfulness of the forest virginity could best be seen from the riverside. The low marshland lay to his left. The alluvial soil and the tall trees which cut through heaven with ease were all about him. The potential of the forest was inexhaustible, he thought as he recalled a common saying among his friends. The farmer nearby, 20 kilometers away, were yet to scratch the potential of the forest. They had not bruised it, let alone wounded the forest at all. Before him was the mountain, which had had to climb. He walked slowly to the hut once more and into the heart of the forest. The roaring sound of the river marked the heartbeat of the forest. It filled his mind. He walked on. The sound was receding fast behind him. His worries returned. His steps quickened. The small hut stored the gems. It was their practice to keep some there if they were threatened and felt unable to escape without detection. They had dug a big hole inside the hut and sealed it with concrete. At the left side of the concrete top was a small opening covered with wood. To hide the gems from us outside, they covered the entire floor of the hut with dead leaves and tiny dead wood. They kept the accoutrements of their trade, including hoes, cutlasses, pickaxe, and sacked old and abandoned khaki overall, there as well. The gems they left behind were always stored in the hole. During the day, the hut with its one door and single window looked so ordinary and wretched, becoming part of the dead world of the forest. The hinges of both window and door were rusty, and part of the wooden door had been eaten by termites. However, the leaves which fell from the trees filled some of the holes in the bamboo roof. He watched over for his friends, mindful of the guards all the time. He was alone. Joe calculated his earnings as he wandered into the forest, leaving the path to his left. He wandered back to the path again and smiled. A bag hung in his side. He had hit his foot against a stump a third time, but he continued thinking about the new company he was getting into, and Mama was on his mind. He approached the head of the river and the mountain, and instantly his thoughts were drawn in the noise of the waterfall. He started trotting. 6 men were walking towards the waterfall, not far from where Joe was. Each lived in different parts of the eastern region. Occasionally, they grouped in Accra for a meeting at Joe's house, or they did some shopping in the capital. All of them carried bags. For fear of the guards, they barely spoke but trod forward as quickly as possible. Talio watched them as they arrived. He rose to meet them. He shook hands with the first man who arrived, then the second. He watched them troop in, hiding behind a tree. The third figure sneaked into the small hut without greeting anyone. He bowed, removed some of the leaves and wood, and examined the round wood cover. After satisfying himself, but it had not been tampered with, he returned to his colleagues and announced his presence. "All things go well," he said. "All things go well," his colleague responded. 6 others joined them. They were more relaxed and were conversing, all of them changing soon after into old clothes. Joe was one of them. After some short exchanges among them, and assuring themselves that their hidden treasure was safe in the vault, they turned to an unmarked footpath behind the hut. Joe led the way. The rest followed, as if it was part of a ritual. They walked very fast towards the marshy fields 2 miles away, and were soon swallowed by the darkness. A big tree had fallen during a rainstorm, and now cut a narrow path where it had fallen. The loggers had not come to that path, so it had remained there, decomposing on the ground and exposing the place to the moonlight. Joe's mouth twitched ceaselessly, mopping the cola fluid forming on his lips. His pupils dilated to accommodate the instant flash of torchlight from one of his men in front. As a precaution, He left the path and waited to be sure of the source of the light. A whisper indicated on him that there was no danger. He walked on. They reached the noble mines earlier than they had done on previous occasions, each choosing an area suspected to be rich in minerals. When a cracking sound broke the silence, all the eight stopped and watchfully looked around. Nothing happened. It was a piece of dead wood that had fallen from a branch above. The skies were full of clouds. The forest was soon vibrating from the tremble of thunder which followed. They welcomed it. It would keep the guards away, they thought, and walked on. They attacked the mountain before them. The paths were narrow, and because it was not used frequently, it was covered with dead leaves. The tall trees scattered them all the same. The long stretch of forest gave way to a clearing after 3 kilometers walk uphill. The gradient was steep. The band crawled at a slope pace, holding on to the rocks and the tree by the side of the path. They thunder, roll, and rode. They met the river once more as they started to regain their breath on the plain below. The thunder stopped and was followed by drizzling, which lasted for a short while. Joe jumped into the river first and swam. The first, the rest followed him. They swam half a kilometer across to the other bank of the river. 1 more kilometer walk lay ahead. The forest was vast, its vegetation varied with timber that would be the envy of those who dealt in wood and wood products, trees shooting high to upwards, and brushy undergrowth having thinned over the years. They hurried towards the mines, completely drenched and exhausted. There was silence in the wood once more. Kaleo was careful not to knock his instrument together as he removed the bag from one shoulder to the other. He hugged his head over the bag protectively. One of the adventurers overtook Joe, looked back, and turned leftward into the forest. Joe and 3 others walked on towards the abandoned field where a small stream had branched from the main river. After a few meters, the stream broke into 3 smaller streams. Several holes had been dug there 8 years before by the survey department, but they abandoned them later. Kaleo had always suspected one of the holes to be rich in diamonds. The flood had washed the topsoil from upspring towards the direction. What surprised them was that a British miner who walked that path declared the mines exhausted. However, all the holes dug by his company were carefully sealed. The new mining company, as if following his advice, kept the holes that way but maintained surveillance over them. While they kept watch on one new, he climbed downhill and in a bend knelt down to examine the soil. Excuse me. Joe stopped at a crossroad, bid bye-bye to a colleague, and decided to take the path to his right. He walked to the small stream not far away and knelt down to wash his face. He prayed during the few seconds that he washed his face. Sluicing through the tributaries of the river was done with a garden fork and his bare hands. He got some skulls and put them in his sack. He scoured a sizable half of the soil, spread some on a 2.5 feet square board, and allowed the water to wash the sand and mud. He stirred and turned the board around each time, allowing the water to drain off, and thereafter, Gingerin examined the small stones. He appeared satisfied. He picked stones which he judged to be diamonds. His confidence was bolstered by his find. He scraped through the topsoil carefully with the garden fork and steadily allowed the water to wash over before he picked the stones. Without doubt, he felt sure he was picking his biggest prize that evening. Another group of three passed by him, their feet plugging through the marshy ground. A cluster of rocks sunk in the mud, and water had collected around the rocks, forming tiny islands. A prospector walked to a spot further away, drank some water, and set to uprooting the small plant with both hands. He collected the lumps of earth that came up with the root. He gathered the tiny stones which stuck to the root and smiled with joy. He picked the stones and lumped the rest of the soil into the sack and continued treading the soil, digging through and allowing the water to wash over the waiting. Talio collected the dead wood and leaf that had collected at the mouth of the hole and put them away. Two of his colleagues passed by and continued to the stream. Soon they set to work digging through the mud and gravels. Talio crawled cautiously into the hole, drew out his tools, and scraped the salt away. He planted his feet on the soil. True, he kept flitting most of the time. A lump of soil broke those towards him. He lit the torch and for a while was examining the lump. He scooped a few stones from it and paused. His sack was becoming heavy and weighing him down. A hole he had made was filling up with water. He watched the water wash the gravels and drain downward. Had it not been for the strict sounds of insects, he would have concluded that they had had a good and lucky day. But the sound increased, stopping him temporarily. The muddy water had drained off, exposing fresh stones. He was gladdened by the tiny sparkling that they revealed. There is only one thing, the glory of stones, he said. He did not remember saying those words to himself before. He said so surely and felt relieved. He was halted by the sounds. The shriek sounds of insects filled the forest. Suddenly, there was a disturbance near him. Some animals were fleeing, followed by a prolonged cracking sound. He felt a sharp object slash through his left shoulder. His foot missed the slippery ledges and he landed on the soft floor of the hole. He bent profusely. The soil was cold at first, but the temperature rose fast around him. He started moaning. So this is where we're going to be ending today's book reading section. Thank you so much for listening. Till we meet again in the next one. Thank you and bye bye.